St. Helena is a barren volcanic rock in the middle of the South Atlantic, so remote and unforgiving that ships can take a week to reach it, and the wind is strong enough to ground a brand new commercial airport. There are no beaches, no easy harbor, only black cliffs rising straight out of the ocean, like walls built to keep the world out. And yet, roughly 4,500 people, the Saints, wake up here every morning and choose to stay. For nearly 4 centuries, almost everything they need, food, medicine, fuel, a spare part, has had to survive weeks of open ocean just to reach them. They built a town squeezed between 2 cliffs. They carved 699 steps into solid rock just to get from one side of their home to the other. They grow coffee on slopes so steep it defies reason, and that coffee became some of the rarest on Earth. This is not a story about a forgotten island. This is a story about the people who never asked the world to remember them in the first place, and what they know about staying that the rest of us have forgotten how to do. The cliffs the Saints live inside were not built. They were carved by a hotspot fixed in the Earth's mantle, punching through drifting oceanic crust roughly 14 million years ago. Volcanic activity ceased about 7 million years ago, leaving basalt flows eroded into rock walls that rise between 490 and 700 meters directly out of the water. The island measures 17 kilometers at its longest, 122 square kilometers total, barely enough ground to stand on. The climb to Diana's Peak at 818 meters compresses an entire climate into a few kilometers of rock, scorched coast, and a cold, dripping cloud forest found nowhere else on Earth. The geology did not simply shape a landscape. It built a wall around every person who ever tried to live behind it. In 2016, the British government spent approximately $480 million building an airport on Prosperous Bay Plain, intended to end nearly 4 centuries of dependence on the sea. The runway was finished, the terminal was finished. Then, a Comair Boeing 737 came in for a test flight and hit severe wind shear, a violent, near-instantaneous change in wind speed and direction, thrown off by the same cliffs that make the geology so dramatic on camera. The opening, scheduled for May 2016, was suspended. An island that had waited 2 centuries for reliable access to the outside world watched its one chance at that access get grounded by the terrain that had isolated it in the first place. It took roughly a year of revised approach paths before commercial service finally began in October 2017. The wind was not an obstacle. It was a verdict. The cliffs do not negotiate, and neither does the air moving over them. The people who live on St. Helena today call themselves saints, and the name carries no false modesty about who they are. They are not a transplanted English village. They are the compressed residue of the East India Company's shipping lanes. British administrators, enslaved and later liberated Africans, Chinese laborers brought in under indenture. Roughly 4,500 people carry that inheritance today, a population shrinking for decades as the young leave for work abroad and often do not return. This is what self-contained society actually means here. There was never a mainland to fall back on, no neighboring town to borrow from. Every custom, every recipe, every surname had to be built from whatever arrived on a given ship, then hardened into permanence because nothing new was coming to replace it. A saint's identity is not inherited from one homeland. It is assembled, out of necessity, from the wreckage of several. What makes this history impossible to romanticize is Rupert's Valley. Between 1840 and 1872, after Britain outlawed the slave trade, the Royal Navy intercepted slave ships across the Atlantic and brought the survivors here rather than returning them to captivity. Historians estimate roughly 27,000 liberated Africans passed through the island during this period. Many arrived already dying of disease contracted during the crossing. Construction of the airport access road in 2008 uncovered the remains of 325 individuals in a mass grave here. They were reburied with a memorial only in 2022, a century and a half after they died. These were people freed from one form of bondage only to die on a rock they never chose, waiting for a freedom that arrived too late to reach their bodies, even if it eventually reached their descendants' bloodline. The saints who live in Rupert's Valley today walk past that memorial on the way to the working harbor. They do not talk about it as a sad memory. They talk about it, when they talk about it at all, as the reason they are still here. Jamestown, the capital, is wedged into a narrow ravine between two cliff faces. It cannot spread outward, only climb. Roughly 700 people live in the ravine itself. Another 1,100 live above it in Half Tree Hollow, on the plateau the cliffs conceal from the sea. No road connects the two without first defeating gravity. That is what Jacob's Ladder is for. 699 concrete steps laid at a punishing 44-degree incline, rising 180 meters from the valley floor to the plateau above. Built in the 1820s as the trackbed for a cable-hauled incline railway, until termites destroyed the wooden rail cars by 1871, and only the steps survived.
For a visitor, it is a photograph. For a resident of Half Tree Hollow, it is Tuesday. The walk to the hospital carrying a sick child. The walk home from the market with both arms full. Lungs burning by step 400. The wind off the Atlantic pushing against your shoulders the entire way.
There is no elevator alternative. The body simply learns to climb, the way a lung learns altitude. Not gracefully, but permanently.
Against that same arithmetic of scarcity, St. Helena coffee is less a luxury good than a monument to limitation. Introduced in 1733 from green-tipped bourbon seed stock imported from Mocha, Yemen, the variety has grown in near total genetic isolation for close to 3 centuries. No crossbreeding, no new stock, because there was never a route in for any to arrive by.
Napoleon Bonaparte, who spent his final years exiled on the island, reportedly called it the best thing about the place. By 1845, it was already selling in London at prices that made it, at the time, the most expensive coffee in the world. Never a marketing strategy, just the direct cost of farming anything on 122 square kilometers of vertical basalt, where every bush fights the wind for the right to exist.
A grower hand-picking ripe cherries on a hillside plot, roasting a small batch in a converted shed, is producing a cup that carries the full weight of that isolation in every note. Internet followed the same logic of enforced patience. Until a subsea cable connection was completed in 2023, the entire island shared a single low-bandwidth satellite link. Speeds a London household would have found unusable in 2005 were simply the ceiling here. What the rest of the world now markets to itself as a wellness retreat, a deliberate digital detox, the saints lived as an unremarkable condition of geography. Evenings were built, by necessity, around the front porch. Neighbors trading news that had nothing to do with a screen. Church halls filling for a Friday dance because there was nowhere else the whole street could gather at once. Ask a saint about slow internet, and they shrug more than they complain. They adapted the shape of community to fit the bandwidth they had, rather than waiting for the bandwidth to grow into it.
At Plantation House, the governor's official residence, a giant Seychelles tortoise named Jonathan grazes the lawn each morning at a pace that has not meaningfully changed since he arrived on the island in 1882. He is estimated to have hatched around 1832, putting his age at roughly 194 years, the oldest living land animal on the planet by Guinness World Records' own assessment. Jonathan has now outlived everyone who could remember his arrival. He was already an adult tortoise when Rupert's Valley was still receiving liberated Africans from intercepted slave ships. He was alive through both world wars, through the collapse of the flax industry that once sustained the island's economy, through the year the airport's own runway sat unused because the wind said no. He does not know any of this happened. He simply continues, at his own rate, indifferent to the acceleration of everything around him. An animal that has never once needed to hurry in order to survive is not a mascot. It is a rebuke.
Longwood House, where Napoleon spent his final years, is today a modest, damp, wind-exposed residence maintained by the French government as a museum. Walk through its low-ceilinged rooms, and it becomes almost impossible to reconcile this domestic scale with the man who once dictated the borders of continental Europe.
He arrived on October 16, 1815, and died there on May 5, 1821, not in dramatic circumstances, but of what most modern medical analysis attributes to stomach cancer, in a small bed in a house smaller than most contemporary suburban homes.
Power, it turns out, has a radius. The most feared man in Europe was undone not by an opposing army, but by an ocean that simply refused to let him leave it.
Beyond that radius, on a rock in the South Atlantic, his name meant nothing at all. The wind did not care who he had been, and neither did the cliffs. He lasted 6 years here and called it a prison. The saints have lived here for generations and call it home.
The saints did not choose isolation as an aesthetic. They inherited it, generation after generation, through shipping lanes and slave ships and colonial administration, and most recently, through a runway the wind itself contested for a year. And yet, what has come out of that inheritance is not despair. It is a community that built its own rhythm out of scarcity, a coffee industry salvaged from a handful of struggling bushes, a staircase commute treated as unremarkable, an evening spent on a porch instead of a screen, because a screen was never fast enough to compete, a tortoise that has outlived the very concept of urgency. They do not complain, they adapt, and they keep adapting, because on this particular rock, adaptation was never optional.
Most of us will never stand on a cliff in the middle of the South Atlantic, but nearly all of us carry some version of that rock inside us, a place we have been cut off from the noise long enough to hear what is actually left once the noise stops.
The question St. Helena leaves behind is not whether you could survive that kind of isolation. It is whether, given the choice, you would still pick connection over the silence you have spent your whole life running from.